So in this video, I'm going to show you how to shoot in black and white in camera so that when you click the shutter, the LCD screen shows you a black and white image. I'm going to show you how to set your picture style for it, how to adjust all the parameters of your picture style between the sharpness of the black and white, the contrast. Do you want to add a filter effect? Like, do you want those black skies like Ansel Adams? I'm going to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of shooting in black and white or monochrome picture style on any camera, and then how that relates to JPEG and RAW capture. Pre-visualize and understand how the world is going to convert to black and white. Okay, so I wanted to talk just briefly about learning how to see in black and white. Now, there's some things you can do to actually capture black and white images in camera so that you can see them automatically converted to black and white. Now, there's some tips and tricks to think about. First, if you only have a camera that only captures in JPEG, if you set your camera to only capture in black and white or monochrome or whatever picture style is identified, you will never ever be able to convert it back to color. But for me, the more important thing is if you're going after good black and whites, you've thrown away 2/3 of your pixel data that allows local subject contrast based on the colors within the image. Typically, there will be some way of accessing your picture styles in your camera, and every camera is going to be somewhat different. So, Canon, Sony, Nikon, Panasonic, they all have these options. And then once you choose options, you can actually go in and adjust the level of sharpness, how much contrast. You can actually add sepia tones or color filter effects in camera. And I'm going to show you that here in just a moment. But the first thing to address is image quality. So what I'm going to advise for this experiment so you can see what you're getting is choose raw and JPEG. Now, rarely do I recommend this. There are specific instances where professionally you have to do it. If you're shooting on set, some kind of commercial photo shoot and there's art directors there, creative directors, clients, typically you'll shoot both raw and JPEG because you're going to wirelessly, every click of the shutter, the image wirelessly goes to their iPads as they're sitting in the back of the room, backseat driving. Or if you're a wedding photographer and you're applying, you want to have smaller image files so that if you're one of those photographers that between the wedding ceremony and the wedding reception, you have an assistant build a quick slideshow of a couple hundred images that's going to be displayed on a TV at the reception just moments later while you're out shooting the bride and groom and the wedding people. That's another reason you might shoot raw and JPEG together. But generally speaking, I never try to do that outside of those circumstances, or at least it's rare because it slows down the camera a ton. And I'm pretty much a tried and true raw shooter anyway. But again, for this experiment to learn how to see in black and white, I think it's a good idea to choose both. And here's why. If you have a camera that doesn't have raw potential, then that means you're actually throwing away 2/3 of your image data. A higher end point and shoot or a DSLR or mirrorless camera, well, then chances are what it's going to do is just going to equalize all of your red, green, and blue channels so they're literally identical. But if you have a camera that will allow RAW and JPEG together, this is great because remember the LCD preview, even if you're only shooting in RAW, the LCD preview is a JPEG rendition. So if you choose monochrome as your option, and let's go over here, I'm going to choose picture style and I'll choose monochrome. So see, my picture style is now monochrome, and I can go in here and I can set the sharpness, the contrast. I can apply a filter effect, so like if I were shooting portraits, I would apply a yellow filter effect, kind of emulating what the exact same thing I would do if I were out shooting black and white film for portraits. Or if I wanted that deep black sky look that Ansel Adams got, I would choose red filter, which would mimic the, shooting black and white film with a red filter, which makes everything blue super dark. So you could apply that. And I would encourage you to apply these things to set them up to your taste as you would process them in Adobe Camera Raw or Lightroom, whichever you prefer. So that way you actually see what you typically do when you take the photograph. Okay, now here's the deal. Let's pop over to Bridge. I set up my camera to capture RAW and JPEG, and your proprietary RAW may be NEF for Nikon or CR2 for Canon or whatever, Sony, Panasonic, and all the other brands are. I tend to always convert my proprietary RAW to DNG, which is Adobe's universal RAW format. But again, that too is an argument for another day. Anyway, so that means when I take the picture, all I see is the black and white version, right? This is all I see on the back of my camera. But when I download it to Bridge, they actually all come in as black and white, but as soon as the cache finishes updating, my DNGs will still be in color. Now here's the difference. Let's pop over to Photoshop. So here's the JPEG. Now here's the difference. Well, one, this is a very standard conversion, right? I haven't applied any of my own tastes. Like I would typically shoot every shot that I'm shooting outside with that red filter effect, and I'd bump up the contrast because that's where my processing tends to go. But this is just normal conversion where everything's equalized. And what I mean by that is look at your channels. Click on your red channel. Now click on your green channel. Now click on your blue channel. Did you see the difference? Right. There is no difference. But if you come over here to your raw file and you click on the channels, notice the red versus the green versus the blue. So the way each color channel reacts to a specific wavelength of color is very different. And you can usually play those off of each other to do some really creative dodging and burning. But let's say you didn't even want to do that. Let's go back to the JPEG. Like if you only captured only in JPEG. So I'll reactivate all the channels, go back to my layers panel. I'll add a black and white adjustment layer. Now watch this. I want those Ansel Adams black water. I'm not going to get it because there's no color info here. All the information in here is identical because it's not based on any color information anymore. It might as well just say gray, gray, and gray that are all equal. Like no matter what you do, nothing is going to happen because you don't have that control over your image anymore. But look at the DNG. So now I can add that black and white adjustment layer, and I was like, ooh, I want that Ansel Adams real deep, dark water. Now this image looks like it was underexposed at capture. Let me hit Command or Control L to bring up a quick levels dialog box. And yeah, right away we see this was pretty underexposed because basically my data range isn't reaching from the pure black to pure white. I'm actually missing half the tones in this photograph. So I'll add a levels adjustment layer so it's not destructive. I'm gonna get the same histogram over here, right? And you know the simple fix is just to whatever side of the mountain's not being touched by a pointer, just drag the pointer over to that side of the mountain. So now I can come back to my black and white, and it's going to give me the power to really make that water as black or as dark in tonality as I want, and I can make whatever is of the other color, the other color. I'll compress all that to one layer. I'll come back over here, and I'll just hit Command A, Command C, come back over here, Command V. Now, everybody remembers that's literally the worst way to do that, right? That was like a test. Hopefully in your brain you said, oh my God, that was the worst way to do that. Why is it the worst way to do that? How big is this file? The image layers specifically are 57 megs. So that means I just copied 57 megs to my history panel. Because remember, Photoshop's going to remember the last 20 things you did by default. And so that's a common way that people clog up their memory without even realizing it. So what was the better way to do that? Just grab it. If you've already got two images open, and it can be a background layer, it doesn't matter. Just grab it, drag it over to the one you want, pull it back in. If you hold down the shift key, it will auto center. I didn't use up any of my RAM past the point of actually doing the act. Then it's erased. So this is not in my memory. Anyway, I'm going on a tangent. Let me just show you the difference. Very flat, ability to manipulate. Very flat, the ability to manipulate. How would I get the same look on a super flat, flattened image? Let's do it physically on the JPEG. So as I try to pull it, do you see how things are starting to posterize? I'm losing control over the tones in my image because again, I just don't have as much data to manipulate. Let's go full circle. So again, how do we do this? You've got to go inside your picture style, whatever that is, just hit the menu button on your camera, whatever camera you have, and you're going to have some of these things that are very similar. So just find yours. Here's mine, auto, standard, portrait. So I would recommend doing the RAW plus JPEG thing, maybe just for one cycle, right? Just so you can go back and prove to yourself that what I'm telling you is true. That if you capture monochrome as only JPEGs, you've severely limited the ability of control to manipulate and adjust the local subject contrast in your image. Right? Now, if you don't need to prove that to yourself or you already believe in that, then remember, you can just shoot in RAW. And when you just shoot in RAW, you can still just choose monochrome. And on the back of your camera, it's going to show you a black and white rendition of the scene. But as soon as you open it up in Bridge, you're going to have access to all the colors in all the color channels. It's not going to be erased at all. Until you train your eyes to see in black and white, I think you should consider setting your camera to monochrome, tweaking the sharpness and contrast sliders to your personal taste, maybe using the filter effect. So I'm just going to click on the detail set here. Maybe clicking on the filter effect if you're shooting outside or shooting portraits, because again, that's just going to quickly apply the general direction of the processing that you would be going for anyway. You see how that works? Anyway, I hope this has helped clear some confusion up about that. And if I've made you more confused, just send me an email and I'll help out. Hey, take care.